Okay, it says we're live. I'm just gonna
Oh,
double
we're
check.
live. Lovely.
We love to see it. If you guys can hear us, let us know. I'm just gonna go ahead and see if it's working. The first like 2 seconds of every live show is like, can you hear us? Are we
Sound check.
here?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, yeah, we are here. We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the February live show for the Crusty Club. Today, we're going to be talking about Girl, Woman, Other, which we read in February, like I said, and I'm super excited for this. Before we get into introducing the hosts and talking about the book, I'm just going to make a couple announcements about the future reads for the book club. So this month in March, we are reading Spoiler Alert, which is a romance book that deals with cosplay and it has a plus size main character. I've heard it's really good, so I'm excited. And our live show for this will be March 27th at 3 p.m. EST. And then in April, we are reading Black Sun, which I'm really excited for as well. Also heard really great things. And then in May, we are reading Everything I Never Told You. And this one, Celeste is like one of my favorite authors, so I'm really pumped for this as well. Now that we have talked about the future reads, I'm going to go ahead and let the co-hosts introduce themselves. And while they're introducing themselves and telling us about what they're currently reading, I'm going to ask for everyone in the comments to go ahead and comment a blue heart if you finished reading the book, because I know sometimes people show up and they haven't yet read it because they want to stay for like non-spoiler sections. So leave a blue heart in the comments if you finished the book. And now you guys can introduce yourselves.
Cool. Who's going
No,
first?
you want to go first? You want to go first? I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Brea. Some of you guys might not know me. I kind of focus more on Bookstagram than BookTube. BookTube is coming along. But I'm happy to be here with Chanel and Joelle. Chanel, I feel like, is just like an amazing person. And from what I gather about Joelle, so is he. So, like I said, happy to be here. I'm currently reading Muted. I can't remember who the author's by, but it's written in verse and it just came out, I think, last month. It's really good. Still just working through it, but I'm enjoying it.
Lovely. Hi, everyone. My name is Joel. I run the booktube channel Fictional Fates. I'm just really excited to be here because I know Bernardine Evaristo is a Black British author, and so reading about like a Black British woman's experiences was definitely like enriching. I'm really excited to discuss it as well with Chanel and Brea and just get their thoughts as well. I'm mostly active on BookTube, although not at the moment because I'm being suffocated by my dissertation. But I'm also active on Twitter and Instagram as well. In terms of what I'm currently reading, I'm just about to finish White Tears, Brown Scars, how white feminism betrays women of color. And that's been a really insightful read. I was buddy reading it with Cindy, but then I was like, hi, sorry, I got really busy. So I'm finishing it and then delivering her my thoughts. But I think most of my reading at the moment's been for my dissertation. So I've been reading Black and British, a forgotten history, which deals with a lot of like the things that white history is like left out of the narrative. And it's definitely been insightful for my dissertation, which is on kind of how Black people are being represented in the artistic cultures of the 18th century.
Wow. That was wow. I'm like, wow.
Better? I don't know.
I remember those moments being so pumped about academic reading. Not me acting like I'm not a college student. I'm like, yeah, I remember those moments right now.
Yesterday.
So I am currently reading Big Little Lies, which I'm reading for a readathon that I'm doing today. It's a 24-hour readathon, and I'm really enjoying it. It follows a woman named Jane who moves to a small town, like a small beach town in Australia. And it's like a small town, so there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of tea spilling. And I've already watched the TV show, so I know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm just enjoying my time. Now that everyone has introduced themselves, talked about the books they're reading, I will also like to remind everyone that if you want to follow both their co-hosts, which you should, I have their socials in the description, so make sure you do that. But we're going to go ahead and get into some non-spoilery sections about the book. I do see a lot of blue hearts, so I'm really happy about that. I'm glad you guys all read it with us. It's a good time. Um, okay, so quick summary of the book. Let's have Joel give us a really cool quick summary.
Chanel was like, I don't want to do this, so I'm gonna just get Joel to do it.
I'm feeling intellect from you today.
So Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo basically covers multiple generations of Black British women throughout. I think it's like, I don't know where it starts or where it ends, like year-wise, but it's like quite a few generations, and they all intersect, and you don't realize they connect until like there's like small connections between each of the stories. But it's really insightful because it details a lot of the generational differences that these women face throughout their lives, but they all also have kind of similarities and the stuff that is conveyed through the generations as we see today. So such as like the sexism and how feminism is also much more like bigger now in the present than it was back then. And we see this growth throughout each of the different generations. But basically, it's kind of how we read these accounts of these women's lives to see how different, not only different, but also how I'm trying to think of a word, but it basically how different each of their lives are, but also how they're all connected in a way because they all share similar identities.
That was phenomenal, honestly.
Thank you.
I like claps for Joel because that was just phenomenal.
It really
yeah, so if you haven't read the book, I feel like that summary alone should interest you into reading the book. But let's go ahead and share our overall thoughts and also what we rated the book. And everyone in the comments as well, go ahead and comment what you rated the book and what your general thoughts were. Who wants to go first here in the live show to talk about their general thoughts?
I'll go first.
Like,
Amazing discussion.
So I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I think going into it, I didn't know what to expect. But then I realized that it was like a lot about like relationships and like the nuances between like the different types of relationships there are, especially like with Black people. And I think I like when I read books, one of the main things I actually really love to read is about relationships. And that's essentially what this whole book was about. So my overall rating, I gave it a 4. I just like that it explored, like you can't really put all Black experiences in a box. You can't put all Black people in a box. And kind of to Joel's point about how everybody's experience were different, but they're also connected in a certain way. I just thought was amazing. And I know people had some thoughts about the writing style of this, but I actually really enjoyed it after like the first like 15 pages and I got used to it. It actually made me read it faster than probably the way some other books are formatted. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars overall.
Cool.
Love that. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think that it was definitely a really insightful account into like each and every woman's life and kind of how not only in some circumstances like their status as a woman, but also a status as a woman of color and a Black woman, and also how their their sexuality in some cases also intersected with that, and how kind of different their lives are and how they've had to adapt to the environments that they were not only raised in, but they also chose to live in. And some of the tales are really like encouraging because they tell about like success and how they've elevated, but then you see the sacrifices that they've had to make in order to achieve this success. And it's definitely an insightful read. I think, especially going off of Brea's point about how you can't put all of every single Black experience into, and specifically a Black woman's experience, into a box. I think one of the characters says this really well, where she says that someone says that she's like a great like a great example to her people or something like that, and so she's automatically made an ambassador for all Black people, and she's like, why put that weight on me? So I definitely felt like that I resonated with that a lot as well. And there was just so many things, especially as a Black British person, that I resonated with as well. And going off the writing style, like Brea, I think it was initially a bit jarring, but then once you like got into it, you kind of fell in love with how lyrical and poetic the writing style could be, especially with the way that it's formatted in some circumstances. And I think it emphasizes the impact of the tale a lot. So yeah, I ended up giving this a 5 stars because I just loved it so much. And yeah.
Yeah, so to talk about what I gave the book, I'm gonna hold it up so I can be like the rest of you guys. But to talk about what I thought about this book, I really, really loved it. I was kind of scared going in because I had heard almost nobody talk about this. I was like, what's going on? What's the tea? I was like, oh. But I really, really loved it so much. I felt like this book really did a great job of, like Brea said, like you can't really represent every single person, but I feel like it did an amazing job of representing a lot of different Black experiences. I felt like the writing was quite interesting, like the writing format, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I do think that it was done for a reason, and I really, really loved the characters. I also really enjoy reading books about relationships, tension, decisions that are difficult to make. So I really loved it, and I also gave it 5 stars. It blew me out of the park, and I feel like this is a book that I will continue to recommend to people because it was just so good. It's so unique in the I just can't get over the writing. Like, who would think, okay, let me sit down and write a book with no punctuation? And then, like, imagine being the person who picks up this book and is like, yeah, let me take this to a publisher. And the publisher's like, where's the punctuation? I don't know how publishing
I just
works.
imagine the editor being like, add punctuation, and then Bernardine Evaristo's like, no.
Like, no, the book doesn't come with punctuation, and everybody just has to agree. And I just think it's one of those books where it really works for this type of story. And so I just really loved it a lot. Let's see. Lots of 5 stars. This is really good news. Okay, I see a lot of 3 stars. And I do see a lot of people talking about the structure, which was my next question. I'm guessing both of you read this physically only, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I read it physically and on audio, and I definitely think that because I started on audio, once I opened the book, I was like, where are the periods? Like, I literally was like, what's going on in here? What is like, I was so confused. And so, like, I feel like this is definitely one, like, if you like audiobooks, start with the audiobook, because that really, like, from the get-go, I was like, this is a 5-star read. And I feel like it's definitely because I didn't see how the book was written until I was like halfway, and then I opened the book and I was like, ooh. I was like, what's going on? Like, I literally thought, like, I opened one page that looked like a poem, and so when I flipped to the next page, I was like, wait, how long is this poem?
Not how long is this poem?
I was like, where is it going? So I was like, anyways, redecoration.
Yay.
Yeah, the writing was just really interesting. I think that's the part that's going to be a hit or miss for a lot of people, because I do think that the writing, in addition to the amount of characters, like, let's talk about how many characters are in this book.
They're just like zipping left and right and center.
Right. Like, it just made me feel like, imagine having that many characters and being able to weave them into the story so flawlessly. I was shook.
Yeah.
I was shook.
I will say, like, your point about the audiobook, like, as I was reading it, it made me feel like someone was like telling me a story, like they were passing down stories of all these women. And once I kind of got into that mindset, it like flowed a lot better for me. So I could understand what you're saying, like it probably lends better to audio depending on like what you prefer. I also like never have to take notes when reading a book, and I definitely had to take notes to keep up with all these characters. Once I realized that they were all like intertwined, I was like, wait a second. All of them are matching up, and I don't know how. Okay, I need to start making a map or notes or something. But I actually enjoyed it once I like got used to it, and so I like looked forward to figuring out how like each character was like connected to the others, and so it just like added another interest point to the story for me, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think like I had to Google. after reading this like character list to fully understand how everybody was connected, because you had some people in the past, right? And some people were like more closely in the present, and some people were like in the middle of that timeline. And so it was like you were reading about someone's child, but then you were going back in the next part looking at that person. So I really like this comment about how you were able to see different perspectives, but then also those specific characters while you were in someone else's perspective. So it was confusing, but at the same time, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like it gave them a lot more sense. Like the character arcs were like, you were kind of dipping back and forth between like their character arcs. You'd start like maybe at the very beginning, and then you might zip like 3/4 of the way through, then go to like the first quarter, and you're just like, I don't get like the progression, and like there's like no linear storytelling with this. It's more so we're just gonna zip around the timeline and see what happens. And I think I appreciate that a lot more, because it's kind of like you got to see what made them the person that they are today, and kind of their experiences of like what made them like who they are. And especially like seeing them, like seeing someone else in like another story, you're just like, hey, I know you. I've seen you in like someone else's story. And then there was like that, I think there was like one of the stories where you got to see the other side of like the other side of the story, and you were just like, oh,
yes, that was
so bad for you.
I think you're talking, so yeah, to that point, this is the perfect person, because Carol's story, I think Carol was the one who ended up becoming a lawyer. Did she become a lawyer?
She was a banker.
I think a banker. She became like the VP.
Yeah, she became a banker. So like, you remember how she had that teacher? Oh, this is spoilers, by the way. We're getting into spoilers now. So
like,
whoever is here, I know, I'm like, anyway, it's the whole story. No, whoever's here, so RC might want to leave, and whoever else has not finished the book. But the part where we learn about Carol and her history, and like, cause you know, she ends up marrying that white man, and then we see her mom's perspective of why she was so like genuinely, absolutely not. That whole part, literally, I was like, Mom. Terrified. Like the whole part about being Nigerian, it just shook me to the core. But like, you see Carol's part, right? And then you see the part where she had that teacher, and how like Carol was like, my teacher was using me, blah blah blah. And then you see the teacher's perspective.
Honestly, I was like,
I was like, because it made me, not that it made me sympathize, but it made me like, okay, this person has this whole history, and they were trying to kind of redeem themselves with that student, but then the student's like, you're using me. It was just so much more.
I was like, Shirley, I'm so sorry, I misjudged you.
Right. Right.
I was like, you bitch, and then I'm like, oh shit, sorry.
I know. I was like, let me erase the paragraph that I've been writing.
Back to the past.
I was like, anyway, it was like, ooh.
It was when she like ended it being like, I felt used, and I was like, oh my.
Right. Because when you think about it, Carol did use her. Like, they low-key just used each other.
Yeah.
Literally.
I don't know. It was just so much. This book just makes you realize, like, the entire time I was reading it, I was like, every interaction you have with someone is based off of their previous experiences with similar interactions. That's like one of the things that I just kept thinking about the entire time reading this book. It was wild. It was wild. But what do you guys think your like favorite character was, or a character that you connected to the most?
I would say, so those are like two different answers for me. And I was like really trying to do some like internal thinking, because obviously like I'm not British, and but the character that I kind of like, you know, saw myself the most was actually Carol, and I'm not Nigerian, but I think how she kind of like situated herself like kind of closer to whiteness to feel a little bit more comfortable in her life is kind of something that I was like, damn, that hits kind of a little bit, because of like how I grew up. Like I said, I didn't have like strict parents or anything, so I can't necessarily understand that aspect of it, but trying to protect yourself by positioning yourself a certain way, or trying to think that, you know, if you're closer to whiteness, then you know, you're seen as more successful, or you're seen as, you know, more palatable in some people's eyes, I guess. So I I resonated with her the most. And then especially when you're bringing in like the Shirley aspect, then it made me think about like, were there people in my life who I like felt like, dang, like you're being really selfish. Like I did all this work, but then, you know, they probably felt like I was being selfish at the same time. So I definitely resonated with her a lot. But I will say that my favorite character was Hattie. But we'll get into that like in some of the other questions. But she was my favorite character, but I resonated with Carol the most.
Wow. Great answer. I mean,
literally.
So much.
Now I'm thinking even more because I did resonate with Carol the most especially because I'm Nigerian. So like a lot of the conversations that she had with her mom, and like it just made me think about conversations that I have with my mom or that I have with my grandma. And just like the way that her mom, like the entire discussion about how you come into a country. And like, for example, when Bumi went into talking about how she will like haggle to get the chicken cheaper, or she'll get this from this store. And then they like, but when you're in a country as an immigrant, like they blame you for what you're doing, but you're like the one that's constantly thinking about how to improve the things around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just made me think so much. So I definitely related to Carol, like, and the tension between her and her mom. I was like, oh, child, this is a lot. This is a lot.
You're like,
right. But I mean, I guess I can't even think of who my favorite character was because I resonated with Carol, but I don't know that I had a favorite character because they were all like, there's so many things in all of them that I was like, yes, but then no. So I don't think I could pick a favorite.
I feel that. For me, I think like the character I resonated the most with was Yaz, and more specifically like her university experience and kind of the way that like she had like gone through university and like with her friendship group and everything. And it was definitely something I resonate with, especially with my own experiences with like academia and being a person of color within academia. Like I know we were talking about this right before like the live show started, and about how like tired we are with academia. So I definitely like resonate a lot with that and kind of Yaz's observations as well as she goes through university. And I think Dominique was a story that I resonated with partially because of the way that she was being emotionally abused and then later on physically. But it was definitely something that I resonated with personally because of that reason. And it was definitely also really like insightful to see kind of how like the developments of feminism in different ways in that aspect, because we got to see it through this section about how feminism took many different forms for these women, and how kind of you can like, and how like far they went in their feminism to like remove themselves from men or from the male experience. And it was definitely quite like interesting to read that like from someone who is male. But yeah,
I just got like the most heart-wrenching flashback of Dominique's like chapters because I definitely like related a little bit too hard. I was like, let me get out of here. Let me go. I like flip the pages.
I was just like, maybe put the book down and just
this is like a very, I don't know if you guys have read In the Dream House, but it's so the relationship between Dominique and Nzinga, like that relationship, if like it's really intense, right? But if there was any book to recommend that would kind of not give someone closure, but would kind of have a similar type of feeling, I definitely recommend In the Dream House because it's a phenomenal book that really goes into relationships like that. And like their entire relationship is just so wild. Like I just have to like the part where like Dominique just moved to the US.
Literally,
I was like,
just like, bye.
Like from the moment that Nzinga was in the story, I was like, this is not gonna go well. Like I already see where this is going. Like this is not going to go well.
That was it. It was when Nzinga was like, don't use black garbage bags. I was like, excuse me?
Right.
We gotta draw the line somewhere.
Don't use black mail. Black. I was just like, so if it has black in it, we shouldn't use it.
I can't remember who it was that challenged her when she said that, But
I think it was
really,
Amma, and then
it
she
was
was like,
Amma, right?
He was like, we don't like you. And I was like, shut
Right.
up.
That was like that whole thing reminds me of the people who are like, we need to normalize the normalization of normalizing the normalizities of normalizing. Like that's what that reminded me of. And I was like, what do you mean? Like which was like black trash bags. I was like, what do you mean? Like what does this have to do with
What's
us?
the relevance?
Right. Like that was so wild. That we ain't even gonna talk about that because like I can't even.
It gave me flashbacks, not for myself, but I feel like a lot of friends I know that have been in situations, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. No, it definitely, I think like Dominique and Nzinga's relationship is definitely one that happens very frequently.
Yeah.
And it was really heartbreaking to see like, oh, you meet somebody who you think is so amazing and so wonderful. And like at the beginning of your relationship, you're like, oh, this person treats me so well. They take care of me. They pay attention to the little details. And then like the rose colored glasses kind of come off and you're like, okay, now I feel like a child. Now I feel a little bit like I can't make my own decisions. And then when you speak up, like it was just wild. Like I was like,
all I'm gonna say is thank God for Gaia. Thank God for Gaia, who is just like, do you need help?
Get out of here.
Just like,
those are the people that really like people like that are the people who really like. It wasn't even like a what should we do? Like it was quick. It was like we're getting you out of here. You're leaving. Like so, I really loved that. It was like snatch. Literally, Dominique got snatched from that situation, and I was so grateful that she was saved.
I agree.
It was wild. We talked about the storylines as well, right? So, do you want to go, Brea, into a little bit of a discussion of why you liked Hattie's character? Because I'm curious before I ask the next question.
Oh no, that makes me nervous. I just feel like with her, to someone else's point, how you can kind of see people from different views. And I feel like with Hattie, you really got to see what people viewed her as like a great grandmother, as a mother, as a daughter. And so like seeing that complete circle of like how she was viewed. And then I also think like her perspective on like, even though she was older, like Morgan was trying to explain like her identity to her and just like things that she was going about. She wasn't, you know, the way that I would have expected maybe someone her age to react. And she was just kind of honest with Morgan, like, hey, like I'm old. You got to give me a minute to kind of, you know, wrap my head around this. But like, I'm accepting you for who you are. Just be who you are, you know? So that aspect of it. And then again, just like I said, just seeing her like kind of full life journey from when she was a baby up until she's like 90 something years old. And then again, it coming full circle when we learn about Penelope and then that. So it's like, I just feel like a lot of the storylines just all interconnect with Hattie. And I'm just like, okay, you're giving me main character vibes and I like this. And that's just giving it just, I just reading
Penelope. Penelope. We're going to talk about Penelope in a little bit.
Yeah.
You're just sounding like every one of the sort of like Penelope.
Right.
I was confused when I read Penelope's story at first. I was like, why? I was like, I thought this was supposed to be about Black women. I'm confused.
Right.
So then eventually it started to make sense. But yeah.
The entire time I was like, why is Penelope here? And then we got to the end and I was like, I kind of wish Penelope wasn't here, but this is a really important thing to have, like, because that is so real. Yeah. But we're going to talk about her in a little bit. My next question, I'm like, we're
going to get to you in a bit.
My next question is, throughout the story, right, we talked about different themes. Like we have family, we have love, we even went through like friendship and immigration. What do you guys think? Like, is there anything you wish the author had gone into a little bit more or had discussed a little bit more in the story?
So I will say, I feel like something that always like is a little miss for me in books, which is part of the reason that I don't think I gave it 5 stars, is like when Black experiences are talked about, there's a lot of the time like some type of trauma is involved, right? But rarely do I see, or just like in some of the books I've recently read, how people get over those traumas and how they're like moving through them. And I feel like that was kind of a miss. Like, I think in some of those instances, you see them coming out on the other end better. And there's like a short description of maybe how they got through it or like how they're just thriving now. But I think that there's always kind of like a little lag or miss on, you know, actually addressing those traumas and like actually working through them in a healthy way. Like you guys were talking about Dominique, and, you know, she was in this, you know, obviously very unhealthy relationship, and she was able to get out of it and move on. But I would have liked to see a little bit more, just any like self work that was done, or just, you know, just seeing a little bit more of like the process of how they were getting out of these situations. Because a lot of them endured a lot of things. Like even Carol, she went through, again, another very traumatic experience when she was very younger. And you can see how it affects her as an adult. But, you know, it just seems like it kind of just like she just one day just woke up and got over it and just like started living her life. And I feel like that usually causes problems in real life. That causes problems later down the line. And I just think with all the conversations that were happening in the book, I would have just liked to see a little bit more of that, you know, conversation unfolding. Yeah.
I can go next. Joel's literally like, it's your turn. So for me, I definitely agree. I'm very similar in what I wish the story had done more, and what specifically in line with that, I wish there was more of a discussion, because I don't really remember there being much of a discussion on mental health specifically, because, you know, you have like different generations in the story, and whenever people think about mental health in the Black community, I feel like it's a lot of times not a discussion that happens, especially when you think about people who are immigrants or people who are children of immigrants, or, you know, like people who are, you know, everyday interacting with children who come from such backgrounds. I really wish that there had been like a little bit of a discussion about, okay, let's talk about how you said, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I feel like at the very least, one thing I really wish was there was, how do I feel now that this is, especially with stories like Carol, right? Or stories like Morgan's story. I just really wish, or Dominique even more, like there's just so much of a mental health discussion that I really wish had been addressed, because a lot of times, I don't know like about you guys, but a lot of times like when I mention, oh, let's talk about like anxiety, like depression, things like that, it's usually, well, just pray about it. Or like, that doesn't bother us. That's
just
not a
manifest
thing
it away.
Right. So
okay, but
right. So I wish that had been like discussed, and maybe the later generations, you know what I mean? That's the only thing that I wish had been there. But yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. Like, especially where kind of mental health has become such a normal thing to talk about nowadays, it would have really done well for the younger generations just to be like, oh, like I see in like the older generations, they were afraid to talk about things. But we're in like 2021, or 2018, I think, is when this novel was written, or 2019. And they're just like, we should be able. Yeah, I was like, I think they should be like, we should be able to talk about these things, and like, especially with like Yaz. Because I know she was at university and all that, like having like a friendship conversation with her friends, being like mental health check-in or something like that. I think that would have been quite nice to have as well. And I definitely agree, like there should have been more of a focus on mental health as a whole, especially since a lot of them did go through harrowing experiences. And especially now with kind of the things that are going on in the UK with the discussions about Sarah Everard and like everything that happened to her, I definitely think like it's important to have a wider discussion on like a lot of the things that do impact women, and more specifically Black women today.
Yeah, I definitely think those are discussions that need to be had, because this book is very, very recent, and I think the author did a very wonderful job of talking about a lot of things. But every time, like Brea said, like when you read a lot of Black stories, like stories centered around Black people, there's always a lot of trauma in them. And I really wish that Black authors, you know, writing in future, and that a lot of them have been focusing on mental health, like even in fantasy, like with the Song of Rates and Ruin, there was like a mental health discussion in that book, you know? So my one wish is when we get more stories like this, they do involve that mental health aspect, or that how is this really like, because you can't just read a book and have all this trauma in the book and then like leave it and be like, well, it's great that she like moved to the US, but like what happened there, you know what I mean? Yeah, I also do wish, now that I'm thinking about it, because I also don't remember much of this being discussed, I wish that I had seen a bit more of the, I don't know how to explain this, because it's a book written by a Black British author, and there's a lot of focus on British people. So I wish that we had got even more, because a lot of stories are like U.S. centered, right? And so I just wish that there was more of that as well. Like there was a lot, but I'm like, I want more. Like I need
You're
more.
like, give it to me.
Yeah. Especially as somebody who does visit England very often. Like I have a lot of family that lives in England, so it's like, give me more. Let me gobble it up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this is a story that I would be like, hey, cousins, here's like, look up the trigger warnings, but
like,
if any of them would pick up a book, like, you know what I mean?
I would love to like if she had like added a story about like something that's like happening in today's time, because I think the racism in America and the racism in like the UK is a little different. And so I would have loved to like read about like someone's experience, like experiencing racism in like a current like time period in the UK, because especially with the whole like Meghan and Harry thing happening recently, I'm just like my eyes are, I'm like different. Both are racism, like all of it's racism, but it's like kind of different just to hear about other people's experiences like in a different country with it. So
I think Joel will probably have a lot to say about this.
I was just about to get into it.
Right here.
Like, it's like with the racism in the UK, it's kind of like when you try and open up a discussion about racism with white people will automatically assume you're calling them racist. And so they're like, I could never be racist. I literally had a discussion once with someone who I was like, I like literally can't say that a white person would never be racist, because he was like, do you think I could be racist? And I'm like, I can't say yes or no to that question to protect myself. And then he was like, I could never be racist. I've received training that prevents me from being like racist. And I was like, I'm sorry, how does training like change your mind? So I was just like, I can't. So it's more so here, it's kind of like, one, they don't like discussing racism because they think they're being accused of it. And it's also very much just, they can be vocal at times, but also it's very much in the microaggressions as well that they purvey to people. And like, they're very more vocal on social media than they are in person sometimes, because, but that's only speaking from like my experience and not speaking for everyone else. Of course.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like I like mentioned, I have a lot of family that lives in England, so every time like I visit, it's very interesting, especially like the Asda grocery trips. The Billabong girls, they're always ready. Like, so Asda's like this grocery store, right? So every time, let me just bring up an experience. It like because I don't live in the UK like very frequently, like I just go there to visit and then come home. One thing that I personally have noticed, like Joel said, like it's different, because in the US, like they'll just say it and it'll be a joke to them, and it's like, okay, that wasn't funny. But what I've noticed in the UK is they're very like slick, like they're very sly.
They'll just like stay like,
yeah, they'll be like, your people. And you're like, what do you mean, my people? They love that one.
Or they'll be like, where? You'll be like, oh, so where are you from? And I'm like, well, I was born in Wales. And they're like, no, but where are you from? And it's like,
yeah. And they like, they're generally, and what I find interesting is because, especially in like the London area, there's a lot of Nigerians. There's a lot, like we are everywhere. And it's interesting because, like, for example, like in California, right? There are not as many Nigerians in California as, let's say, let me just pick a city. Let's say San Francisco, right? Versus London. You will see way more Nigerians in London than you will see in San Francisco. But it's interesting how your people is still so much more prevalent. Like it's still so there. when it's like you have
Mhm.
definitely met 50 Nigerians walking down the street. So I know that you're not, you know what I mean? I just think that like from what I've noticed with British people is they're more they see Africans and immigrants a lot more overall than here in the US. Like you might meet someone that's like, "Oh, I have one Nigerian friend." But then like in the UK, they might have like 12, but it's still like it's strange. I don't know, Joel. Like, do you get what I'm
Mhm.
saying? I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
you
know
get
what you're
what I'm
saying.
saying.
Yeah,
It seems
like
like
they
okay, go ahead.
very much like lump everyone together, and it's just like you black people, and it's like, but we're all
Right.
different. Like I remember one experience in university. Well, I'm gonna do two. One experience in university where like me and one of my friends were like sat together, and they were like, oh, like we love that you're representing your country so well, and we're like, we're from we our ancestry goes two separate ways. Like we're not from the same place, please. And then another experience which I had, which it kind of plays into that joke aspect, was in my very first year of university, and it was like a Halloween party. And someone decided, a white person, I don't know why I have to phrase as a white person because you'll immediately get as a white person, decided to dress as the KKK for this Halloween party and proceeded to chase me around this party for the entire night.
Please
What?
say so. Please tell me that's not a real story.
Oh no, it is a real story. Yeah. So fortunately, he's not at university anymore. But yeah, that happened.
That is like terrifying. I think like one thing that's just really shocking, and again, because I'm not there all the time, is that the I just remember the one time that I brought up racism in the UK, like to my uncle, and he was like, "That's a very American problem." And I was
Mhm.
like,
Yeah. Like they'll think like it doesn't affect us as much. They'll think like it's way worse in
mhm,
America purely because a lot of racism in America is like very physical and very like it can be very verbally abusive. But then here it's like I'm not saying it's less, but you can definitely see the roots of racism in every community that you see because like they might not see it, but we do, and it's like we're
mhm.
still affected by it.
Yeah, I definitely think like it's been interesting, especially with the creation of TikTok and being able to see people being vocal about their experiences from
Mm-hmm.
different areas of the world. Like on TikTok, if you like 5 posts from similar accounts, your entire feed is going to be the same thing. And so now I'll see like Black people from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from Europe, and all of our experiences are so similar.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's scary how they're so similar. But then if you're like in Italy, I can't say that country's name. Italy. You
Italy?
know, yes. Not me exposing
Saying
myself. Anyways, what Joel said, you'll like hear a very similar experience. Like you could be someone who's never been there, but you have an identical experience to somebody who has never left there. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to like see that. And I think that's another thing that this book does very well showing, because people are from different, different areas, they have different backgrounds, but the experiences are so similar.
Yeah,
It scares me.
definitely.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you like usually? Oh, sorry. Say what you want to say, Brie.
No, I was gonna say I feel like we could go on and on about racist
Right,
experience.
right.
Honestly.
That's why I was like, we're gonna be here for 12 years. Just make Joe unpack his whole dissertation right here.
It's like, hi, welcome to my dissertation session.
Pull out the PowerPoint.
Oh, God.
Like, I mean, it's weird because sometimes you laugh about it, and then like when you really think about it, like we might be laughing, but when you really think about it,
We're like,
you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
not good. Right. So it's just
like it's something really weird to be comforted about that like other people like I don't feel alone in this, and like it's like, oh, other people like have had similar experiences to me, but then it's sad that other people have had similar experiences to me. So it almost feels like you have this like love-hate relationship with the fact that you're being comforted by the fact that other people have gone through the same thing, and it's just like,
right, like there'll be sometimes where Joel will like post something and I'll be like, oh my god, the same thing happened to me, and then I'm like, oh, I hate that for us.
literally,
I literally hate that for us. Like, I don't want to relate.
And it's crazy
Literally.
that so many Black people can say, like, I've had this experience.
Right.
And they all have the same experience, but then people who are racist are like, but racism doesn't exist. But it's like,
Right.
one person didn't do this act against all of us at one time. Like, there's clearly like
Honestly.
similarity there between us and you guys. So it's like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just wild. I think authors are just so skilled, like Black authors are so skilled at talking about these things in a way where like you feel so touched and haunted, but at the same time, you're like, this was a great thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I don't know about you guys, but I read, like I've been reading a lot of books that have like different sorts of Black experiences. So like Britt Bennett's books are like that. And there was also Such a Fun Age, which was a very interesting book, but like I'm really enjoying these sort of literary fiction type discussions in
Mm-hmm.
books. And I do think that as time progresses, they are going to get more popular. Like on Bookstagram, I see them all the time, but when I watch booktube videos, I don't see them. So I'm like, I feel like pretty soon it's kind of going to tilt in a way where more people are reading books like this. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
As it should be.
Yeah, as it should be. Do you guys like
True.
typically read books like this? People in the comments, do you typically read books that are like literary fiction or like general fiction?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the genre?
I've started to pick up more recently as I've gotten older. I think it was something that I don't know why I just like didn't want to pick up before.
Mhm.
And even now I still have to like be in a certain headspace to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was realizing I was reading one of the good ones last month and I didn't realize I was going to have such an emotional response to it. And for people who don't know, that book kind of covers police brutality and how it affects like a family who kind of goes through that. And I wasn't expecting to, you know, have to put the book down because I felt like I related a little too much to it, and I could, you know, easily see myself in a position like that. So while I have been picking it up more just to kind of like broaden like how other people's experiences mirror mine, I'm also realizing I have to really be in the right mindset and like right heart space to pick it up because those experiences are so real for me. But yeah, it's something that I have been picking up more and I'm enjoying it. It's just, I gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Great. Definitely. I think for me, I kind of didn't read much literary fiction when I was like younger, but like through university, I've kind of decided like I should start reading literary fiction, although Cake May being my very first piece of literary fiction probably wasn't the best idea. And so like now it's kind of like it is something I'm seeking out more and definitely exploring like different types of literary fiction because it feels like I'm exploring so many things, not only about myself, but like other people as well and their experiences. And whilst I can get that through like fantasy and like other like speculative fiction genres, I feel like it's a lot more nuanced and not like a lot less of the focus of the story. Whilst if I'm picking up like Go Woman Other, which discusses kind of that a direct kind of account of like the narrative, it's kind of like I can resonate with that a lot more, and it's definitely something that I do resonate with a lot more because it's kind of real life experiences that are fictional but like are still taking place in everyday life.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar to both of you because I actually not despised, but I did not enjoy reading like at all for a really long time. And so when I started into the literary fiction genre, I want to say like the first I can remember reading was Little Fires Everywhere. And I was like, ooh, there's a lot going on here. And I loved it. And so now I think the big difference that I've noticed is reading literary fiction from authors of color hits different.
That's it right there.
That's true.
There's so many things that they discuss, so many things that are like relatable, even if it's from like an ethnicity that you are not from. It hits different. And I think like what Brea said is really important, where a lot of times when I'm entering these books, I have to like, I just finished The Mothers. I had to literally unpack, like when you're entering a book that's like literary fiction, especially if it's from an author who shares an identity with you, you already know that there's going to be a lot of heaviness in the book. So it's kind of like you have to enter being like, and then you have to leave being like, and then you're like 5 stars.
Right.
Like, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it makes you like hold a mirror up to a lot of things too that maybe you denied about yourself in the past, or you have to sit with it for a little while sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'll just like skirt past it and be like, I'll come back to this.
Right.
But, yeah, but for the most
We'll unpack this later.
Right, exactly. But at some point I have to unpack it. So yeah, just to get to your point, you just gotta enter it in with caution. Just know what you're getting into. But
yeah, like every time I finish a literary fiction, I literally throw myself into a romance. I'm like, like I'm reading a romance book right now, right this moment, anything, because I just think it leaves you having so many questions. Because one thing I've noticed with a lot of literary fiction authors is they'll like offhandedly say something that's like really intense, and then you have to like go back and be like, did I read what I think I just read?
Yeah.
And then you just think about it for hours and you're like, I can't believe that was there. That was a lot. But I don't know. It's just a lot. But what was your like biggest takeaway, or anything that you feel like, okay, after reading this book, I definitely see this differently. I definitely didn't think about this. Like, this is hitting me really hard.
I think for me personally, it's kind of like inspired me to talk more about my experiences as a Black British person, and kind of talk a lot more about kind of how we need to not only listen to but uphold Black women more, especially within Britain, because like with the conversation that we're having now about like centering women and making sure that men are doing more for Black women and Black women specifically, like I think it's definitely something that I want to do personally, and ensuring that we are making things much safer for women, and like ensuring that. But also for me personally, like I said, I want to speak up a lot more about my experiences, because I feel like because I resonate so much with this, I feel like people also resonate with my experiences, and it will really get a conversation going about how we can change things and how we can improve things so that we can have more nuanced discussions and also try and hopefully make things better for everyone. And yeah, like literary fiction's kind of like, weirdly, you have to unpack everything and like Brea said, hold a mirror to yourself, but then by the end of it, you're kind of like, I'm really inspired to do something because of this book, and I'm really inspired to enact some form of change. And I think that's really great, because it's kind of like getting a little bit of advice from like the book, and like the things that you take away is kind of like, here's something you need. And I like that.
Yeah, I kind of agree on like that same aspect of not necessarily sharing my experiences, but doing some work in researching other people's experiences, or just asking other like people of color like about their experiences, whether it be in America or like not in America. Because I think, you know, living in America my entire life, like I kind of have tunnel vision of like just the Black experience in America, you know. And so this book has kind of opened my eyes, and like there's other things going out, you know, happening in the world, and people are experiencing some things that are similar to you, but they also have some differences. So I think it's just kind of opened my eyes to just do some more research on what people's experiences have been in the past in other countries, and what their experiences are currently in other countries. The world's always changing. It's always evolving. We see something new in the media every day, especially when it comes to race. So like I said, I feel like I focus on like what happens in America a lot. And this made me like reflect and realize like, girl, there's other things that are happening, and people are experiencing other things that just aren't in America. And even just like the conversation of like immigrants and like their experiences, even though some of them are coming to America, just like their experience is completely different than mine. So kind of going back to like the nuanced experience of Black people, you can't put all Black people into a box. And me, and like I know that and I say that, but even just me also just being Black, still making sure that I'm like educating myself on like what other people are going through.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of things that that touched me. One of them is it really makes me appreciate friendships that I have with my Black friends, especially because I feel like within my friendship with different Black people, they're from so many different places. You know, like Joel is British, like we both live in Texas, so we're going downhill anyway. So, but like it just made me really appreciate, okay, I have all these different friends, right? But they are really people who understand. Like this book really showed me that your friends understand what your Black friends understand what you're going through. And one thing that I like really thought about the entire time is the fear of sharing your fear with people, if that makes sense. Like the fear of like, I can't let somebody know I've been through this. Or I can't let somebody know that I've experienced this thing at this store, this thing with this person. It just made me really think about the fact that more people than you think understand what you've been through, right? So like we've seen the different generations and like all things they experience. And it's like, if this character had said this thing to that character, imagine how much more seen they would feel. So it made me think about that and just like the importance of really leaning on the people who understand what you're going through. Because, you know, sometimes you like talk about something you've experienced and it feels like you're just talking to a blank wall because they don't really get it. Like, they're like, oh my God, that's so horrible.
Although they'll question it, being like, did you see it as that? Or is like, is that really what happened? And you're just like.
But then when you like bring it up to your Black friends, they're like, wait, I kind of thought the same thing. Like, I thought it was just me. You know what I'm saying? So it just really made me appreciate that. And then like Brea said, like, I haven't lived in the US my entire life and I'm not always in the US. So even still, I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot in here that I have never thought about or that I have never really asked about, you know? Because you just think about like two different things and you're like, okay, well, there's this experience and there's that experience. But this book is like, no, there's all of these experiences that we go through collectively, that we have to unpack, that we like can share with our friends. It's definitely a book that there's like literally every single character could have their own book.
Honestly.
I genuinely believe that every single character could have their own story and it would be a fully fledged out book and I would buy it. That's all I'm saying. Like, so when I just think about like how good this book was, it makes me sad that the author had to like share an award with someone else. And I'm like, I can't, what? Like, this book should have won. Why?
Yeah.
It's just such a good book.
Yeah, I agree.
It is a very good book.
Yeah. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Any final things you want to share? Or if you both want to share anything that you're currently working on that you want to plug and advertise, go ahead and let the audience know.
I'm just living life out here, guys.
Same. Brea's like,
I'm trying. I was telling Chanel and Joel, like, I'm trying to get my booktube together, but it's a lot of work. So if you're one of like the 200 people subscribed to me, I appreciate you so much. I'm trying to do better. Other than that, I'm pretty active on Bookstagram, and that's about it.
You can catch up on my content whilst I'm having a hiatus. I'm mostly active on Twitter and Instagram for this moment in time. I'm just sharing snippets of my stress and just my ramblings, mostly, of bits of my daily life. But yeah, hopefully you'll join me when I come back.
Joe's like, I'm shy, so like I don't want to tell anybody to follow me, but I was like,
also follow me. But yeah.
Yeah,
I showed Chanel my new intro yesterday.
It looks so good. I'm so excited. I was like fired the way I literally tried to hand letter things, and I'm like, this is so excruciatingly difficult. Back to the downloaded fonts. Back to the font. Back to Fonto. Like, I was like, I can't. I am not like, my handwriting in person is really good, but when I get into Procreate, something about it just looks ugly.
Yeah. Like my hand like gets shaky when I'm like, and I'm like, this is not what I had in my head. Like,
you're holding the pen and you're like, Literally, I got so scared, and my hands shake very easily, so I just can't. So if you guys want great content, because Brea has some popping photos on her Instagram, every single time I see one, I'm like, my wig flew to the opposite side of the world. Like, my wig is gone. And Joel just like, if you guys want beauty and innovation, you just need to follow him everywhere because he really is that bee. Like, really, absolutely amazing. I wanted to end the live show like on a good note because we discussed so many heavy things. Like, I was like,
we didn't get to everything we could have talked about with this book. Like,
right. I'm like, I just needed to create some level of let's laugh and leave a little bit like happier because
as the previous generation would say, live, laugh, love.
Literally. So I just want to thank both our co-hosts for joining me today. You guys are absolutely wonderful. This was such a great reading experience with both of you. And I want to thank everybody in the live show for participating, for showing up and stuff, and having so many great comments because I was like, are people going to say something? Are they going to be scared to say something? Because I was like, but this has been a really wonderful live show. Again, both of their socials, YouTube and stuff will be in the description as long as you are here. Along with the Discord and the book club Instagram. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I will see you in like 2 weeks for spoiler alert. Bye.
Bye.